Talk of the most chilling cases involving female killers in the world. Texas has seen some spine-tingling, chilling, mystifying cases. In this video, we dive into their dark stories, the crimes that shocked the nation, and the moments leading up to their execution. You'll hear about their final meals and the last words they spoke before facing justice. These stories reveal a side of crime that is both fascinating and terrifying. If you want to understand what led these women down such deadly paths, stay with us as we uncover the grim truths behind their lives and deaths. This is a video you won't want to miss. Kimberly LaGale McCarthy. Date of execution: June 26, 2013. Kimberly LaGale McCarthy was convicted and sentenced to death for killing her 71-year-old neighbor, Dorothy Booth, in 1997. Dorothy, a retired college professor, lived in Lancaster, Texas. McCarthy murdered her during a robbery at Dorothy's home. On July 21, 1997, McCarthy reportedly called her neighbor, Dorothy Booth, a former psychology professor at El Centro College. She told Booth that she was coming over to borrow some sugar. However, prosecutors later said that McCarthy planned to rob Booth. After McCarthy arrived at Booth's home, she stabbed her 5 times with a butcher knife. She beat her with a candelabrum and cut off her finger to steal her diamond wedding ring. McCarthy stole Booth's purse and her Mercedes-Benz. She then pawned Booth's diamond ring to buy crack cocaine. The day after Booth's murder, police charged McCarthy with murder. Evidence showed that she used Booth's credit cards at a liquor store and had Booth's driver's license. Police also found the murder weapon at McCarthy's home, and Booth's DNA was on it. In 1998, a jury in Dallas County, Texas, convicted McCarthy of killing Booth. During the sentencing, prosecutors showed DNA evidence that linked McCarthy to the murders of 2 other elderly women in Dallas County in December 1988. The victims were 81-year-old Maggie Harding and 85-year-old Jetty Lucas. Prosecutors said she killed them to get money for cocaine. However, McCarthy was never charged with those 2 murders. On November 24, 1998, the court sentenced her to die by lethal injection for killing Booth. In 2001, McCarthy won an appeal of her conviction, but later the court retried her and sentenced her to death again on November 1, 2002. Her execution was first set for January 29, 2013, but just hours before the lethal injection was scheduled, the court granted a stay of execution. The execution was then set for April 3, 2013. In late March, the Dallas County District Attorney announced that the date was moved to June 26, 2013. McCarthy was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville on June 26, 2013. Her last words were, "This is not a loss. This is a win. You know where I'm going. I'm going home to be with Jesus. Keep the faith. I love you all." There is no record of her last meal. Suzanne Margaret Basso. Date of execution: February 5, 2014. Suzanne Margaret Sue Basso was convicted, along with 5 others, for torturing and killing 59-year-old Louis Buddy Musso in August 1998. Musso was mentally disabled and they killed him to collect his life insurance money. Musso was murdered 16 days after he arrived at the Basso home. The people involved were Basso, her son James O'Malley, Bernice Aarons Miller, her children Craig and Hope Aarons, and Hope's fiancé, Terrence Singleton. They forced Musso to do chores for them. He also had injuries even before they killed him. According to O'Malley, Musso was killed at Miller's apartment. He was beaten and burned with cigarettes as he sat on a child's playmat. They also used a wire brush on him and placed him in a bathtub filled with a mixture of kitchen cleaner and bleach. Basso and her group dressed Musso's body and left it in Galena Park, Texas. A jogger found the body and called the police. The Galena Park Police Department said Musso died from multiple blunt impact trauma. Judge Mary Lou Keel, a district judge in Texas, decided that most of the suspects would have separate trials. The prosecutors were Colleen Barnett and Denise Nassar. O'Malley's trial was set to begin on April 13, 1999. Craig Arons's trial was scheduled for later that month. Miller and Singleton were set to be tried together in May. Hope Arons's trial was scheduled for June. Basso's trial, the last one, was set for July. The court convicted O'Malley of capital murder and gave him a life sentence. Miller was convicted of murder and received 80 years in prison. Craig Arons was also convicted of murder and got 60 years. Singleton was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison. Hope Arons' trial ended in a hung jury, but she later took a plea deal and testified against Basso. She received a 20-year sentence and has since been released from prison. Suzanne Basso was convicted and sentenced to death. While on death row, she was held at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's Mountain View Unit, now called the Patrick O'Daniel Unit, in Gatesville. Since Texas no longer offers special last meals on death row, Basso ate a regular prison meal of baked chicken, fish, boiled eggs, carrots, green beans, and sliced bread. She was executed on February 5, 2014 at the Huntsville unit. When the prison warden asked if she had a final statement, she said, "No, sir." She was pronounced dead after receiving a lethal dose of pentobarbital. Lisa Ann Coleman, date of execution, September 17, 2014. Marcella Williams's son, Devontae, was born prematurely in 1995. Before she lived with Coleman, CPS investigated her. The complaint read that she was not watching her 2-month-old son, Devontae, so CPS caseworkers monitored the home for 6 months. In 1999, officials removed Devontae and his 1-year-old sister from the home because of concerns of physical abuse. When CPS investigated, Devontae had thinning hair, bruises on his back, and swelling on his lip and his penis. CPS found that Coleman had harmed Devontae, so they placed Devontae and his sister in foster care. After 1 year, Marcella Williams regained custody of the children. To get them back, she agreed to stay away from Coleman. Marcella had a 3rd child in November 2000. In October 2002, when Devontae was in 1st grade, CPS received reports that he was being physically and medically neglected. CPS caseworkers visited Devontae and his siblings, but the children said they were not being abused. Around that time, Coleman and Marcella Williams began hiding Devontae. They stopped sending him to school and did not take him to the doctors. They made school officials believe they had moved out of the district. CPS investigators visited the Williams home 9 times between November 13th and December 30th, 2002 to follow up on the reports. No one appeared to be home during any of those visits. On July 26, 2004, Marcella Williams called 911 and told a dispatcher that her 9-year-old son, Devontae, had stopped breathing at their home in Arlington. Devontae and his younger sisters lived with their mom, Marcella Williams, and her partner, Lisa Coleman. When the dispatcher attempted to provide Marcella Williams with instructions for CPR, the call was disconnected. When emergency medical personnel arrived, Coleman told them that Devontae had stopped breathing minutes earlier. However, the medical team saw rigor mortis and determined that Devontae had been dead for several hours. Devontae was 9 years old when he died. He weighed 35 pounds and had 250 scars on his body. He had infected wounds on his wrists and legs, where someone had tied him with plastic extension cords. He had a fresh tear on his lip and a healing tear where his ear met the side of his head. Police also found a blood stain on a golf club in the home. Police arrested Coleman and Marcella Williams and charged them with injury to a child. They were held in jail in Arlington with a bond set at $200,000. After Devontae's death, his 3-year-old and 6-year-old sisters were placed in foster care. A spokesperson from Child Protective Services said the girls looked healthy. The Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office said that malnutrition caused Devontae's death and pneumonia also played a part. During the investigation, Colema told authorities that she sometimes beat Devontae with a belt, and Marcella Williams helped her tie up the child. Later, officials upgraded the charges against both women to capital murder. They were each offered a plea deal. Plead guilty and receive a life sentence with a chance for parole after 40 years. Coleman refused the offer and chose to go to trial for capital murder. Marcella Williams accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to life in prison. She will not be eligible for parole until 2044. In 2014, Marcella's aunt, Tracy Williams, said the family believed Marcella should have also received the death penalty. She said the family blamed both women for Devontae's death and believed Marcella had a duty to protect him from harm. At the end of Coleman's trial, the jury took 1 hour to find Coleman guilty of capital murder. During the punishment phase, Coleman's lawyers tried to avoid a death sentence by sharing several details about her past. They said she was conceived through rape, exposed to alcohol and drugs at a young age, and suffered abuse that led her to enter foster care. They also said she had bipolar disorder. The jury rejected these claims and sentenced Coleman to death. On September 17, 2014, Coleman was executed by lethal injection. Her last words were, "I just want to tell my family I love them. My son, I love him. The girls on the row, I love them and they keep their heads up. Tell Darlie I love her hand in hand. God bless y'all. I'm all right. Tell them I finished strong. I love y'all. I'm done. I love you, Richie. I love you. Thank you, Brad and John, all of y'all. God is good. I love you, Auntie. I'm done." There is no record of her last meal. Betty Lou Beets. Date of execution, February 24, 2000. Beets married her first husband, Robert Franklin Branson, when she was 15 years old. According to her supporters, all but one of her marriages were troubled by abuse and violence. Before her arrest for murder, Beets had a criminal history that included public lewdness and shooting her former husband, Bill Lane, in the side of his abdomen. Beets married 6 times, including twice to the same man, Bill York Lane. In 1970, Beets shot Lane twice in the back. She was acquitted after Lane said he had threatened her life first. The couple remarried but divorced again a month later. In 1978, Beets tried to run over her third husband, Ronnie C. Threlcold, with her car. Both men survived and later testified at her murder trial. Beets was convicted of shooting her 5th husband, Jimmy Don Beets, on August 6, 1983. Betty Lou Beets told authorities that her 5th husband, Jimmy Don Beets, was missing from their home near Cedar Creek Lake in Henderson County. Later, her son, Robert Branson, testified that Beets had told him she planned to kill her husband and asked him to leave the house. When Robert returned to the house 2 hours later, he discovered something was wrong. He found Jimmy Don Beets dead with 2 gunshot wounds. Robert Branson helped his mother hide Jimmy Don Beets's body in the front yard. After they buried the body, Beets called the police to report him missing. The next day, according to Robert, Betty Lou placed some of Jimmy Don's heart medicine in his fishing boat. Then she and her son abandoned the boat in the lake. On August 12, 1983, someone found the boat washed ashore near the Redwood Beach Marina. Believing Jimmy Don had fallen overboard and drowned, police spent 3 weeks dragging the lake, searching for his body. In 1985, the Henderson County Sheriff received information that led to new evidence. Police arrested Beets for the murder on August 6th. After getting a search warrant, officers searched her home. They found Jimmy Don's remains buried in a filled-in wishing well. They also discovered the remains of her fourth husband, Doyle Wayne Barker, buried in the garage. Both had been shot with a .38 caliber pistol. She was never tried for Baker's murder. Betty Lou Beets went on trial for the murder of Jimmy Don Beets on July 11, 1985. She was charged with killing him for money and the promise of money. She pleaded not guilty and claimed that 2 of her children had committed the murders. On October 11th, the jury found her guilty. 3 days later, the court sentenced her to death. Betty Lou Beets was executed by lethal injection on February 24, 2000, at the Huntsville unit. She did not ask for a final meal and chose not to make a final statement. Frances Elaine Newton. Date of execution, September 14, 2005. On April 7, 1987, Frances Elaine Newton shot and killed her husband, Adrian, who was 23 years old, her 7-year-old son, Alton, and her 20-month-old daughter, Farah. Frances Newton was just shy of her 22nd birthday when she committed the murders. A court convicted her on November 17, 1987, for killing her 3 family members execution style. Frances continued to claim she was not guilty, even in her final moments. Reports said that Frances and her husband Adrian had marital problems and that Adrian struggled with substance abuse. All 3 victims were shot with a .25 caliber pistol, which belonged to a man Newton was seeing at the time. Newton claimed that a drug dealer killed her husband and children. Houston police confirmed that her husband was involved in drugs and owed money to a supplier. Despite this, Newton maintained her innocence from the time of her first interrogation in 1987 until her execution in 2005. Prosecutors presented evidence that, about 1 month before the murders, Newton had purchased life insurance policies worth $50,000 each for her husband, her daughter, and herself. She made herself the beneficiary of both her husband's and daughter's policies. Newton admitted to forging her husband's signature, saying she did not want him to know she was using money to pay the premiums. Prosecutors argued that she committed the murders for the insurance payout. Investigators also found that Newton had hidden the murder weapon in a relative's home shortly after the killings. 2 hours before her first scheduled execution on December 1, 2004, Texas Governor Rick Perry granted a 120-day reprieve. He wanted more time to test forensic evidence in the case. Reports conflicted about whether police recovered a second gun from the crime scene. Ballistics reports showed that a gun seized by law enforcement and linked to Newton was the murder weapon. A relative of Newton, who went to jail shortly after the murders, said a person he shared a cell with bragged about killing the family. Many people, including 3 members of the jury who convicted Newton, expressed concerns about evidence that was never presented at the trial. On August 24, 2005, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied a motion for a stay of execution. On September 9th, it denied another appeal for a writ of habeas corpus. This was her 4th application. On September 12th, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles voted 7-0 against recommending that her sentence be changed to life in prison. This happened despite evidence raising doubts about her guilt and a letter from her husband's parents asking to spare her life. That same day, the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit refused to hear an appeal of her sentence. Her new attorney, David Dow, asked Governor Rick Perry for a 30-day stay to prove Newton was wrongly linked to the murder weapon. On September 13th, the Supreme Court of the United States declined 2 appeals without dissent. Newton was executed by lethal injection as scheduled on September 14th, 2005. She spent a little more than 17.5 years on death row before the execution. Newton was the third woman executed in Texas since the state resumed capital punishment in 1982. The first two women were Carla Faye Tucker and Betty Lou Beets. Like Beets, Newton made no final statement and did not request a last meal. Carla Faye Tucker. Date of execution, February 3, 1998. Carla Faye Tucker was sentenced to death for killing two people with a pickaxe during a robbery. At the age of 13, she started taking drugs and having sex. She left school at age 14 and followed her mother, Carolyn, a rock groupie, into prostitution. Tucker began traveling with the Allman Brothers Band, the Marshall Tucker Band, and the Eagles. At age 16, she briefly married a handyman named Stephen Griffith. Around the same time, she started spending time with bikers and met a woman named Shawn Dean. Later, Shawn Dean married Jerry Dean. In 1981, the couple introduced her to a man named Daniel Ryan Garrett, also known as Danny. Tucker, then 21 years old, started dating Garrett, who was 35. On June 13, 1983, she went to Jerry Dean's apartment in Houston around 3 in the morning. She planned to steal a motorcycle. She was with her boyfriend, Daniel Ryan Garrett, and a friend, James Liebrandt. Liebrandt said he went to look for Dean's car while Tucker and Garrett used a set of keys to get into the apartment. Tucker said Dean had lost the keys and she had found them earlier. During the robbery, Tucker and Garrett went into Dean's bedroom. Tucker sat on Dean, forcing him to grab her arms. Garrett interrupted and struck Dean numerous times in the back of the head with a ball-peen hammer that he found on the floor. After Garrett hit Dean, he left the room to carry motorcycle parts out of the apartment. Tucker stayed in the bedroom. The blows Garrett had given Dean caused him to start making a gurgling sound. Tucker wanted to stop him from making that noise. So she picked up a 3-foot pickaxe that was leaning against the wall and started hitting Dean. Garrett then came back into the room and struck Dean one last time in the chest. After that, he left the bedroom again to keep loading Dean's motorcycle parts into his car. Tucker then saw a woman hiding under the bed covers against the wall. The woman was Deborah Ruth Thornton. When Tucker found her, she grazed Thornton's shoulder with the pickaxe. Thornton and Tucker started to struggle, but Garrett returned and pulled them apart. Tucker hit Thornton continuously with the pickaxe until it got stuck in Thornton's heart. In September 1983, Tucker and Garrett were indicted for murder. They were tried separately. Tucker faced charges for the murders of both Dean and Thornton. After she testified against Garrett at his trial, officials dropped the charge for Thornton's murder. Garrett was not charged with Thornton's death either. Tucker pleaded not guilty and remained in jail while awaiting her trial. Although the death penalty was rarely used for female killers, the court sentenced Tucker and Garrett to death in late 1984. Garrett died of liver disease in 1993 while waiting to be executed. On death row at the Mountain View unit, Tucker shared a cell with Pam Perillo, whose sentence was later reduced. Between 1984 and 1992, Tucker's requests for a retrial and appeals were denied. On June 22nd, she asked the court to spare her life. She said she was under the influence of drugs during the murders and would not have committed them if she had been sober. She claimed she had changed and become a better person. Her plea gained support both in the United States and overseas. However, the board denied her appeal on January 28, 1998. Just hours before the execution, Texas Governor George W. Bush rejected her final appeal to stop it. While on death row, Tucker stayed at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice assigned her death row inmate number 777. On February 3, 1998, state authorities took Tucker from the Gatesville unit. They flew her on a TDCJ aircraft and brought her to the Huntsville unit, the location of Texas's execution chamber. On February 3, 1998, Tucker was executed by lethal injection. For her last meal, she requested a banana, a peach, and a garden salad with ranch dressing. Her last words were, "I would like to say to all of you, the Thornton family and Jerry Dean's family, that I am so sorry. I hope God will give you peace with this." She looked at her husband. "Baby, I love you." She looked at Ronald Carlson. "Ron, give Peggy a hug for me." She looked at all present, weeping and smiling. "Everybody has been so good to me. I love all of you very much. I am going to be face to face with Jesus now. Warden Baggett, thank all of you so much. You have been so good to me. I love all of you very much. I will see you all when you get there. I will wait for you." Josefa Chipita Rodriguez. Date of execution, November 13th, 1863. Josefa Chipita Rodriguez was convicted of murder and hanged in San Patricio County, Texas. She was reportedly born in the Spanish province of Nuevo Santander, part of the Viceroyalty of New Spain. She lived in the South Texas town of San Patricio and often gave travelers meals and a place to sleep on the porch of her lean-to by the Nueces River. Rodriguez was accused of robbing and murdering a trader named John Savage with an axe. $600 in gold was stolen from Savage, but it was later found downriver near where his body was discovered, inside a burlap bag. Rodriguez and Juan Silvera, who might have been her illegitimate son, were charged based on circumstantial evidence. They were tried before Judge Benjamin F. Neal in the 14th District Court at San Patricio. Although Rodriguez said she was innocent, she refused to testify or speak during the trial. Some people think she stayed silent to protect her son. The jury asked for mercy, but Judge Neal ordered her to be executed. She was hanged on Friday, November 13th, 1863. She was 63 at the time of her death. Her last words were reported as, "No soy culpable," which means, "I am not guilty." One witness at the hanging said they heard a moan coming from her coffin. She was buried in an unmarked grave. There is no record of her last meal. Her ghost reportedly haunts San Patricio. Reports say she appears most often when someone plans to execute a woman. The same reports say that Rodriguez's ghost wears a noose around her neck. She rides through the mesquite trees or wails from the river bottoms. If you enjoy the way we create videos and would like us to bring more cases like this to light, please hit the like button and subscribe for more in-depth dives.